G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Sunday the 7th of February 2016. Just about to get first dog on the moon because I think Outsiders is winding down.
7 away from 10. Yep, he's back.
Hello, Patriots, and welcome to the first Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living for 2016. I'm still the Walkley Award-winning editorial cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. This week, the issue that's gripping the nation on the lips of every man, woman and irregular maritime arrival is, of course, tax reform. Every government talks about doing something and every government squibs it. It is the most pressing issue facing us today.
What do we want? Tax reform! When do we want it?
When would be good for you?
What do Australians want from our tax system, from superannuation? Should rich people be given more money, or should we just eat poor people? There are so many of them. And what about multinational corporations offshoring their profits? Offshoring is when companies send their money to Singapore or Ireland so they don't have to pay tax. It's all legal, but is it moral? Well, they don't care. They have loads of money. Many Australians have feelings about this issue and they say words about it too. What do you think? No, wait, don't tell me. I don't care. And then there's the GST, 10% currently, but not on food. Should it be on food as well? Should it be on drugs? I will be if I have to listen to another argument about the GST. Should it be 15%? Is it a tax on the poor? Who cares? I work for the ABC. I'm loaded. Whatever it is, there's always something stopping us from having this important taxation reformation conversation. And this time, the obstacle to reform is not federal opposition leader Bernard Hotpants, who, I never heard of him. It is not the lobbyists, the rent seekers and big business having fancy interspecies sex with federal parliamentarians. That's not what's putting the brakes on tax reform. The main obstacle to the conversation this nation needs to have on tax is, in fact, babies. Who? Babies. You heard me. What's so great about babies? Nothing. Have you talked to a baby recently? They're rubbish. They've got nothing to say. They can't walk around without help. They're always crying and babbling nonsense and then falling asleep. They're like tiny little versions of Warren Truss without the weird old people smell. And it's a particular group of babies that are threatening our nation's well-being right now. 37 asylum seeker babies pose a greater threat to the land of the fair go than climate change, than I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, than Clive Palmer all put together. Because if Australia doesn't send 37 tiny babies to live in a tropical death camp, to be raised in a dangerous, soulless hell, unprotected from rapists and mental illness, Australia will once again be inundated with boats full of asylum seekers, and Peter Dutton won't have a bar of it. He refuses to be responsible for the deaths of people drowning in boats. And look, well, that's fair enough. Actually, everyone wants to stop the boats. I mean, the opposition didn't before they became the government. The boats were quite handy for them then, but that's another story for another time. Once Christopher Pyne had explained to Peter Dutton where babies come from more generally, and then where these specific babies came from, he was ready to act. Right, I'm going to roll my sleeves up and we will set them free, return them to the ocean from whence they came. Because even Peter Dutton was a baby once. Oh, no, he was a bag of gravel, and an evil wizard turned him into a real boy. I saw that movie when I was a kid. I loved it. The thing is, if your policy of border protection relies on hiding the rape of a 5-year-old child and then returning that child unprotected to the vicinity of the rapist, and this is going to seem like a long shot, but I'd suggest that's a bad policy, and you're possibly even a bad person if you are actually a person at all and not a bag of nasty gravel disguised as an immigration minister. I know that might sound harsh, but when the price you pay to protect one group of people is constructing a towering edifice of deliberate neglect, degradation and secrecy, and then throwing people off it, you might want to think about doing it differently. Even the Catholic Church moves the pedophiles somewhere else eventually. We just send the kids back to them. How on earth did we get here, Australia? This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, well, he's got a point there, hasn't he? I think I'd like to steal a line from Annie Cantavad. Hi, Andy, shout out. Living over there in the wilds of frozen Canada. Anna Cantavad put up a video last week, I think it was, maybe the week before, one of his, in a series he's doing on hate. And he had hate Hitler. And in the description there, he said, maybe we should build a concentration camp and fill it with Nazis. And that pretty much kind of sums up the headspace of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party and the National Party, because they are all in favour of having a gulag, of, like the man said, death camps on Manus Island and Nauru, and children that were born on Australia, so according to the Aborigines, they have an Aboriginal soul in the dreamtime, they are being legally regarded as asylum seekers, genuine refugees, but because they showed, or their parents showed up on a boat without papers, therefore they are, quote, illegal migrants. And our government tripartitely agreed, everybody except the Greens supported the idea, that we should legislate that they can never ever settle in Australia. You can come here by a boat and be declared to be a refugee by the United Nations, but the descendants of the boat people who showed up, you know, with Governor Arthur Phillip and the Sheep and Potato Brigade to dispossess the locals 245 years ago, they're not going to let anybody show up here on a leaky boat having come from Afghanistan because it's a war-torn country that Australia spent 12 years shooting the shit out of. Oh, no. Off to Nauru. Sit there in a tent in the tropics until you die of going mouldy from the feet up. Or get raped when you're 5 and then we'll send you back, because we send the kids back to the pedophiles, because we're Australia. Australia, cunt. Gives a person the shits. It would be enough to give diarrhea the shits. What else has happened this week? Well, Malcolm Turnbull, the allegedly middle of the road, moderate Liberal, who was going to be a big difference from Tony Abbott, the raving fucking lunatic. And Tony Abbott was a raving lunatic because he doesn't believe that anthropogenic global overheating is real. He can't get his head around climate science. He doesn't believe in greenhouse effect or any of that stuff. He just believes in growing the economy. You know, grow the economy. Well, Tony Abbott wanted to get rid of the argument about global warming by dismantling the scientific apparatus in Australia so that there would be no research being conducted, therefore there would be no data, and thus and because the media could not say that there was a problem because there's no data to support that allegation, you see. Malcolm Turnbull was supposed to be an alternative to Tony Abbott, much more enlightened. So this week, Malcolm Turnbull's government announced $350 million to $500 million, they haven't quite made their mind up, worth of cuts to the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organisation, and the cuts will fall primarily on the climate science departments of the CSIRO. They'll get rid of the hydrologists and they'll get rid of the people who know about soil and agriculture and salinity and all of them, get rid of them. We're going to get rid of the people who can forecast rains and talk about storm behaviour and all the rest of it, because it's inconvenient to the Liberal National Party to have anybody coming up with scientific reasons not to do the economically planned programs that the Liberal and National Party have in their minds. They don't want there to be any scientists to say, if you dig a coal mine here and it rains and it overflows, you will fuck the entire river system. That's not what they want to know. It's not what they want to hear. It's disheartening to look at what's going on and to know that 15% perhaps of the Australian population votes Green, and everybody else is swallowing this garbage that if Australia locks up babies in a death camp, that will stop other people entirely from getting on a boat in Thailand after they've walked from Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan or Syria or wherever the hell it is that's been blown up in internecine proxy wars by groups funded by outside interests. And the thing occurred to me the other day, all of the destruction that's happening in Syria has been created by guns and bombs and bullets and mortar shells and artillery shells and missiles that have been constructed, filled with explosives and propellants outside of Syria. Syria didn't make any of those death machines that they're blowing themselves up with. It's all been supplied by somebody else. Some European or American or Russian armament manufacturer has been paid. They have fed their families for years, manufacturing and stockpiling all that shit they're firing off in Syria. And that's not what's feeding their kids this week. What's feeding their kids this week is the stuff they are now being paid to build, to resupply the military stockpiles that are being depleted by sending weapons to Syria. Here in Australia, we're doing more bombing missions over Syria than anybody else except the excited states. And we have 465 Special Air Services commandos camped between Baghdad and the ISIL lines, allegedly teaching the local yokels how to shoot, as if they don't know how to shoot, living in bloody Iraq for the last 25 years since we first started fighting wars there in the name of international solidarity or some bloody thing. Remember when Madeleine Albright went and told Sad Man Who's Insane 2 weeks before he invaded Kuwait that the excited states of Norte Americana does not concern itself with internecine border disputes among its Arab client states? Described as client states because in 1973, Tricky Dicky Nixon contracted the Pentagon to the King of Saudi Arabia to provide mercenary services to all of OPEC, hence client states. America works for them. And then, when Sad Man Who's Insane took Madeleine Albright's green light as being genuine and he went into Kuwait, all of a sudden, all of NATO got to fire off their anti-Soviet stockpile. And that provided 10 years of prosperity for George Herbert Walker Bush's vision of America. And I think that the Yanks complained about Putin having been an ex-KGB colonel when George Herbert Walker Bush was the deputy director of the CIA before he became vice president under Ronnie Reagan Zapp, the demented geriatric who thought Star Wars was real. I wonder who was pulling Reagan's puppet strings. Could it have been the CIA? Like, has the CIA been in power in America ever since Reagan was dancing to Herbert Walker Bush's pulling on the strings? It's an interesting idea, isn't it? And now, everything I said last week about Donald Trump taking command appears to have been superseded by somebody called Cruz, who apparently is an even crazier half-wit than Trump. Trump is moderate compared to Cruz. Trump is a moderate. I'm still trying to get my head around the idea that there's anybody in American politics who's so far out to the right wing of Genghis Khan that they make Trump look moderate. It's a worry. It really is. genuine, total worry. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.